So you want to be a Kinesis. So you want to use your mind to pick up and throw your enemies. Well, then you've come to the right class. In the beginner tab, we have Psychic Attack, which is you're just pressing the attack key. And then you also get, oh, and it only attacks one enemy and, you know, whatever. You also get Return, which takes you back to Kinesis' hideout. Of course, he lives in Friend Story, which is technically like the real world kind of thing. But anyway, you get a passive, and the rest are whatever. So something I should mention, this class does not use MP, so you can't use MP potions to recover, well, MP. What you have to do is you have to attack. For every attack you do, well, not every attack, some attacks actually use it, but let's say the regular attack, just pressing the attack key, you gain 1 energy to use. And this also applies to many of your other skills, unless they have a U next to them. Alright, so let's move on to first job. So we get a passive first, and then we get Kinetic Crash, which when you use it, you throw the enemy into the air, and then you slam them back down. So here you go. That's what it looks like. Don't mind the orbs, that's a third job skill. And it's pretty fast. I mean, you can spam it pretty fast. And as you can see, when I'm using it, I am gaining energy. Or PP, I think it's called power points or psychic points. Yeah, I believe it's psychic points because power point, it says right there, power points is Pokemon. Alright, so that's that. Hits 4 enemies 2 times. And then we get Psychic Force. And this is very important. So what it does is it allows you to push back enemies, and then the enemies that are pushed back will also take damage over time. The cool thing about this damage over time is it only does 20% damage when you first apply it, and then it increases over time. You know, every 1 second, it increases by 10%, going up to 200% extra damage. Mine is the third job, or is there? I believe it goes a third job. Anyway, mine's the max version of it, so it actually goes a lot higher. But at first it only goes up 200%. So not only does the damage over time get increased, but also your final damage goes up. So while the debuff is applied to the enemy, you also do 10% final damage to the enemy that the debuff is on. I just said that, whatever. And of course it gives you energy when you use it. By the way, as you can see, there's 10 little bars here. Every different color, yellow is of course 10 if you fill it. Blue is the next stage, which is 20, and then purple, which is you have 30 psychic points. Okay, so let's move on to our first ultimate skill, which does use up energy. It says it uses 7 psychic points. This attack is still useful even in 4th job. You'll see why later on. It gets buffed like crazy. But it has a very good range, attacking distance. It can hit multiple platforms, and it does many lines for a lot of damage. So you can see I'm all the way down here, and I can hit those enemies all the way up there. It pretty much matches the animation. Next we have Mental Shield, which will get rid of 60% of the damage that you take, but use up 1 psychic point every time you get hit. So before I was taking, what, 3,000 damage? If I jump down here now, I only take 1,000. Or, I mean, you see the number right there. So it reduces damage by a lot, but it uses up 1 psychic point every time you get hit. And of course, if you run out of psychic points, it goes away until you gain 1 psychic point. So if I were to actually get rid of it all, it'll automatically come back up as long as you have it toggled, like activated. So as soon as I attack, it'll come back because I have 1 psychic point now. And then you get ESP Booster, which increases your attack speed by 2. And you get Kinetic Step, which is your flash jump. So let me just regain energy real quick. Okay. You don't need energy to use it, I'm just regaining energy for myself. So you can flash jump twice, and it doesn't really send you that far, but it kind of like pushes you up very high. So I can go from this platform to that platform. And speaking of height, you can even jump and press up and then jump. Like jump, hold up, and then press jump, and you'll do a vertical leap, which can't be done twice, but you can do a horizontal jump afterwards to get even higher. So, you know, if you want to get from this platform to the top platform, you can't just do a normal jump. You have to do another flash jump afterwards to be able to get up here. Alright, so that's it for first job. Moving on to second job, Kinetic Piledriver, which is basically the first job skill except it hits both directions, in front of you and behind you. It's pretty much the same skill. I think it does 3 hits though. It's pretty good. I mean, I really liked it at Drake's. Nope, still only hits 2 times, but it does more damage. And of course, every time you use it, it recharges in energy. Then we get a passive, Psychic Blast. So before you were only able to launch enemies left or right, but now you can push them down. So let's just go up here so I can show you. So now I can knock them down. And you can also jump into it if you want to knock enemies on the above platform to the one you're at. And this is very helpful for just mobbing in general, so you can move them where you want. And then just take them out. I can't believe I forgot. So it's also an increase to the previous skill, which only allowed you to go left and right. Where now, it does 40% damage on the first hit, and then the damage over time is increased per 25% per second. And the increased damage that it can do goes to 400%. And the amount of damage that you deal to enemies that have the debuff is now 15% final damage. And then we have Psychic Drain. Super useful. Because sometimes you're using skills and you're using too much energy. Like you're using your ultimate too many times or something. Well, by using Psychic Drain, any enemies that take damage from this skill, including multiple enemies, will start recharging your power point. Or, Psychic points. So yeah. It says restores 1 point on each use. It just means every time an enemy gets hit. There is a cooldown of 5 seconds, so you can reapply it pretty quickly. So let me get rid of all my energy real quick, and I'll show you just how fast it is. And this is without me attacking. Like, if I were to be attacking, it would go even faster. But it's very good for recovering psychic points. Next, we have Ultimate Deep Impact. So this will use 5 psychic points, but it's very useful on enemies that have DR or any other annoying buffs. Because when you use it, it gets rid of any buffs that the enemy has. So if it's Damage Reflect, you use it. Well, these guys will die in 1 hit, but it'll get rid of Damage Reflect. The thing is that when it does, it goes on a... the boss gains a resistance to having their buff removed for 2 minutes. So even though you can, use it as long as you have energy, don't use it again until 2 minutes have passed, if you get rid of Damage Reflect successfully. So it also increases the damage for Metal Press, which is your, this skill, the first ultimate you got. So already you can see how strong that skill is going to get, even though it's a first job skill. So anyway, the number of attacks is 7, and it gets rid of all the buffs on enemies. Deep Impact, I mean. Next we get Psychic Armor, which just gives you defense and avoidability. Passive and passive. So moving on to third job. Oh, Miyamoto's back. We get Psychic Grab. Oh god, he's screaming again. So, mine is the 4th job version, but for the 3rd job version, of course, for the 3rd job version, you're able to pick up 3 enemies, and then smash them against other enemies, or against themselves, or the ground, or whatever, and you can hit up to 8 enemies. That's including the ones you grabbed, so you can hit the 3 enemies you're holding, and then 5 other enemies. And of course it recovers psychic points. So when you use Psychic Grab, it also only does 3 lines. However, since mine is the 4th job version, it'll hit 5 lines because I can pick up 5 enemies. But it also recovers the psychic points and does pretty good damage. It'll seem kinda weird at first using it, but you'll get used to it. And then next we have Psychic Assault, which is an increase to the effectiveness of the previous push and knockdown skill. And what it does is you can knock back 8 enemies, it does 75% damage over time, and it lasts for 20 seconds still. And then it gets an increase of 50% damage every second, up to 700% damage. And then enemies that have the debuff applied to them will take 20% final damage. And then we have Mind Tremor. So when you put this skill down, it'll suck enemies into the middle of it. Well, I think it does it only once, but any enemy that walks into it will get a debuff applied to them. And what that debuff does is it reduces the enemy's speed, as well as their... Well, I'll just say that it reduces their speed, and then it also allows you to do 10% final damage, and reduces their defense by 10%. However, the defense and final damage increase, or, yeah, you get the idea, is doubled, depending on how many enemies are in it. At least that's what I think it says. And then of course it lasts longer if the enemy stays in it longer. So you can put it down, and then push enemies into it. Next we have Ultimate Trainwreck. This is a very cool looking skill. So what you do is you drop trains on the enemies, and then for, I don't know how many seconds, let me see, 12 seconds, continuous trains will keep dropping onto the enemy, and I just really like the animation. So here, have a look. And it just continues to drop. Although, for every hit that it does, it gets weaker and weaker. So of course the first hit is going to do the most damage. Oh my god, it covers all 3 platforms. And then the damage is reduced by 5% every time that it does damage. So the first hit does 120, 6 lines, and then for every hit that it does, it just does less and less damage by 5%. And of course it increases the previous ultimate skill's damage. Kinetic Combo. There's a 70% chance to allow orbs to fly out as you're attacking, which is the little like balls that you saw flying out at enemies. And then this is just a increase to the previous skill. So now it increases your defense by 500, and it also gives you knockback resistance. Kinetic Jaunt allows you to use up 2 psychic points, but you can fly, pretty much, for a little bit. Depending on your ping to the server or their lag or whatever, it can last longer than the previous times. But the main reason that I would use it is for the 150 hyper, so you can cancel the animation but keep the effects. Or, if I don't make this jump and I don't want to flash jump, then I could just use it to walk up. Well, walk up. I called it walking. So I can basically make this jump without having to do flash jump. So I keep my flash jump, and I made it all the way up here. That's the only real reasons I use it. Otherwise, I never really used it. You can't really attack or anything during it. But you'll see, once we get to 150 hyper, you'll see how useful it is. Passive, 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 and passive. Cool, moving on to 4th job. So now you get Psychic Clutch. Psychic Clutch. Oh my god, I can't speak. Psychic Clutch. My god. Which is an upgrade of Psychic Grab, and it allows you to pick up 5 enemies, or 5 objects if there's no enemies around, and do 5 line. Yeah, that's all it really changed. You pick up more enemies and you do more damage, that's great. And then you have a new ultimate, which is Psychic Shot, which you pretty much throw the enemies or objects that you hold. And the enemies that are hit by the enemy's throne have their defense reduced by 15%. Oh, it also kind of works like a shotgun. So it does 3 lines only, right? But that's for each projectile. So if an enemy's really close to you, they're going to get hit by all 5 enemies, taking 3 lines from all 5 of them. Although I noticed that when I lag, it doesn't do any damage at all, so I don't really rely on it anymore. But it covers a wide area. Like, I could go down here and hit pretty much all 3 platforms. Oh, I should also mention, when you throw enemies, you can throw them into spots they're not supposed to be in. So let me just throw it up there, and look at that, now there's a monster up there. Okay, so next we have another ultimate, BPM, which, as you can see, it increases the damage of the previous skills again, making the first job skill, the first ultimate skill, very strong. Or viable, I should say, even though it's a first job skill. So what BPM does is it hits 3 enemies, and it's a toggle skill. So you can turn it on and off. So here you go, that's what it looks like when it's on. It does 7 lines, and is pretty much your, like, extra bossing skill? Kind of. So yeah, it'll use 1 psychic point for every, what was it, for every second that you're using it? Here, let's see. No, it seems like it's more than a second. But it basically keeps draining your psychic points. There is a cooldown of 3 seconds before you can activate it again. So, I mean, it's not that long. But yeah, I think that's all I really want to say about that skill. Has pretty good range on it. Oh, and you can also keep attacking while you have it out. So once again, it's just an enhancement to your damage. So next we have Mind Quake, which is the upgraded version of Mind Tremor, was it called? Yeah, Mind Tremor. And it just makes the effect a lot better. So now it reduces enemies' defense and increases your final damage by 10%. It also does more damage, and enemies in the area have speed reduction. Yeah, same thing. So it hits up to 5 enemies. Is it really only 5? Oh my god, I thought it was a lot more than that. And for every enemy that's in the area, the damage increase is triple the amount of, and the defense reduction. So next we have Mind Break. And this skill does a lot of damage when you first use it. It does 1,000 damage on 4 times on 15 enemies. However, it doesn't really have that much of a range on it. But when you use it, for every enemy that you hit, normal enemy, not a boss, you gain 1% final damage. So you can gain up to 15 if you hit 15 enemies. But if you do happen to hit a boss, then you gain 5, because bosses count as 5 enemies. So if you hit a boss and then also some enemies, you can gain a lot of damage. But of course there's a cap of 20%. So let me try to gather up a bunch of enemies. Okay. My final damage right now is... Wait, what is my final damage right now? I can't even read it. 20%, and then if I hit these guys, now it's 44%. Did I just go... Okay, well anyway. So yeah, you can see it's a big boost. Alright, and then we have President's Orders, which is pretty much Maple Warrior for this class. Gives you and your party 15% all stats. And then Psychic Charger. Recovers 50% of the remaining points to reach maximum psychic points when used. I just read the skill, but yeah, it's exactly as it says. When you use it, it recharges 50% of the amount of points that you would need to get to 30 psychic points. So right now you can see I have 10. So if I use it, then I recover another 10 because that's... Anyway. Has a 45-second cooldown. And yeah, it's great for recovering your psychic points. Clear Mind is Hero's Will. It recovers, or clears your abnormal status, and I don't think it gives you any invincibility to them, or resistance to them afterwards. That's interesting. So that's what that looks like. Also, Maple Warrior, I love how it looks. I love that girl. Anyway. And the rest are passive. So one passive that I should mention, for every 30 combo kills, so like, you see it, it'll say combo kill 1, or 2 I guess it starts at, because that's a combo. Anyway, so yeah, once you get to 30, or for every 30, the range, the gap between your minimum damage and maximum damage will decrease. So let's say I had 1 mil, and then I had 3 mil, something like that. Then slowly, it'll, like, the minimum range will start to get closer to the maximum range. For every 30 combo. And that's all I should really mention out of the passives. So moving on to hyper passives. I added into when you're attacking a boss, you gain 2, instead of just 1 psychic point. I'm gonna just call it PP. Instead of gaining 2 PP, you know, no, I'm gonna go back to saying psychic points. Oh god. When using psychic grab, or oh god, what did I just say? Okay, so when using psychic grab, normally you would only gain 1 psychic energy, but by hitting a boss, you're gaining 2. So I thought that was super useful. I also increased the damage by both the attack and the throw by 20%. I didn't really care for defense when using the skill, so I didn't add into that. But I did add into Mind Tremor, so the defense reduction rate is doubled. So that's really nice. Lowering defense is always great. Not always. Anyway. And I also increased the duration by 10 seconds. For Mind Break, it has enough damage already, I didn't feel like doing 40% damage. The cooldown is perfect, it matches the buff that you get. And then I increased the final damage that you get by 2. So for every enemy you hit, instead of getting 1% final damage, you get 2. Moving on to the active hypers. At 150, you get Mental Tempest. And let me just use up my energy here. I don't even have enough points for that. Okay, so, you know, used up my energy. So what it does is it hits 15 enemies. It's pretty much like your full screen ultimate attack. And it'll recover all of your psychic points. At the end of the skill, of course. And you have invincibility during the whole thing. The thing is that you're stuck in animation. Unless you use that skill that I mentioned before. Kinetic Jaunt. So remember how it didn't sound too useful before? Well now, if I were to use this skill, and then use Kinetic Jaunt, or I can't use... Oh my god, I just messed that up. I just messed that up. I didn't have enough points for Kinetic Jaunt. Alright, let me skip ahead. Okay, so hopefully past Kyo, or editing Kyo, whatever I'm going to call him, has gotten rid of that embarrassing moment, because, wow. Why did I mention it if he's going to get rid of it? Anyway, so when you use it, you do a lot of damage, but not only that, you recover all of your psychic points. Make sure you have 2 psychic points when you're using it, because you want to be able to, what do you call it? Use kinetic, what was it? Jump? Kinetic Jaunt. So I'm going to go ahead and use it. And it gives you invincibility during the whole thing. Use Kinetic Jaunt to be able to move around and attack or whatever you want, while still having the invincibility. And then when the skill ends, you'll gain all of the, whatchamacallit, the psychic points. Okay, so to make that shorter, in order to get out of the animation for Mental Tempest, use Kinetic Jaunt. That's pretty much all this was for. So that's the 150 hyper. The 170 hyper is Mental Shock, which just binds the enemies. That's all it really does. And by bind, I mean that it keeps them from attacking, moving, or doing anything. For, I believe, 10 seconds? Yeah, 10 seconds. Works on up to 15 enemies. And next we have the 200 Hyper, which is amazing, but it only lasts for 20 seconds, and the cooldown is 180 seconds. So, oh goodness. Okay, so this reduces the amount of psychic points you use per skill by half. That is amazing. Not only that, but it steadily increases your psychic points as well. So before, this recovered, just one. Well, okay, not that. So if I were going to use the throw skill or the train, that takes up a lot of points. Now it's reduced by half. So I'm going to go ahead and activate it. What button did I have it on? I think it was this one. Yeah, so now I'm steadily recovering psychic points, as well as all of my skills cost half the amount of points they normally do. But only for 20 seconds, which, yeah, it could have been better. But it's so good. So good. Alright, so that is actually it for the skills. I'll just do a little bit of mobbing. I'm not very good at mobbing with this class. I'm not very good at anything with this class, honestly. But, I mean, you can do, you can toss the enemies, you can use metal press. I pretty much used metal press the whole time, because when I threw enemies it didn't really do much because I lagged too much. Because if you lag, it doesn't actually do any damage. So, yeah. So I mainly used the press skill, because it does a lot of damage and, pretty much one-shots anything. Except bosses, of course. But it's so strong. Alright, so let's move on to the bossing. Oh god, I left these guys here, they could have killed me. So, when bossing on Kinesis, I'm not actually sure whether I should be using the throw skill or the slam skill, because when I look at other Kinesis, they seem to use the slam skill, but I assume that's because they have the green potion from Monster Park, which makes it stronger than the throw skill. But I'm not too sure. So what I do is I activate pretty much all of the debuffs. So that's Mind Break, the Tremor, the push skill. He is just stunning me non-stop. And then of course I lower their defense. And if you just want to keep the enemy in one spot, you can just, use the down version of the skill. And then I use the train. And when my energy is getting low, of course I use the... whatever that was called, I forgot. But you get the idea. And then of course I can bind him. And if I'm ever running out of energy, which I'm pretty much never going to run out of energy, I can use the 150 Hyper. Oh, I also forgot to turn on whatever that skill was called. So here I'm going to use the second job skill to get rid of DR, or Damage Reflect. And that's pretty much how I boss on Kinesis. I'm sure I'm doing it wrong, but that's how I do it. So since that was so sloppy, and I know it was sloppy because I felt it, I was too busy explaining, not enough doing. I'm not really used to this class, I don't really play it that often. But you want to make sure you use the push, or you can just knock them down if you want to avoid pushing them back. Mind Quake or Mind Tremor, whatever it was called. Mind Break, because you want the final damage. And the defense. Defense reduction. So you can reduce a lot of defense with this class. And then I guess if you have enough points, you can use Metal Press. And that's pretty much all I really want to say about this class. If there's anything I missed, I'm sure there's a lot that I missed. Yeah, just tell me in the comments. Of course, you can use this skill to get rid of Damage Reflect or any buffs that the enemy has that you want to get rid of. But this class is basically only strong when you use all of those like debuffs. So final damage increase, plus lower defense. There's just so much that you do with this class that makes it strong. Because if you just go around slamming things without using any of the other skills, you're not going to be that strong. So make sure you use the other skills as well. And of course to recover psychic points. But anyway, I've blabbed long enough. Thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed. See you in the next video.